In a San Diego courthouse, a decorated Navy SEAL was about to face a murder conviction. What started as routine military justice took a shocking turn when they came face to face with a conspiracy reaching the Pentagon. Master Chief Bruce Reaper, Wayne wasn't your typical defendant. For 20 years, he had served in elite units, known for his uncompromising integrity. When he encountered fabricated evidence against him, he had no idea he was walking into a web of illegal human experimentation. Wayne's refusal to accept a silencing deal would lead to explosive revelations. What began as a murder trial would become a fight for military justice itself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The C-130's wheels touched down at San Diego International with the mechanical precision Bruce Wayne had come to expect from military operations. 6 months in Syria had left him lean and weathered, his eyes carrying that 1,000-yard stare that never quite faded between deployments. He shifted in his seat, feeling the familiar weight of his gear bag and the less familiar lightness of coming home. Through the small porthole, he could see the California sun painting everything in that golden light he'd dreamed about during the longest nights in Damascus. Jessica would be waiting. She always was, despite the divorce papers that had been finalized 18 months ago. Some bonds, he'd learned, survived even the legal system's attempts to sever them. The other passengers, mostly contractors and a few fellow service members, gathered their belongings with the quiet efficiency of people who'd made this journey too many times. Wayne remained seated until the cabin cleared, a habit born from years of watching his six. Something felt off, though he couldn't place what. The jetway smelled like recycled air and industrial carpet. Wayne moved through it with measured steps, his trained eyes sweeping the terminal beyond. Standard crowd for a Tuesday afternoon. Families, business travelers, the usual chaos of civilian life. But there were patterns within the chaos that made his jaw tighten. 2 men in dark suits standing too casually near the gate, a uniformed security guard whose radio seemed more active than necessary. The way certain people in the crowd weren't quite looking at him, but weren't quite not looking either. Jessica spotted him first, as always. She was sitting in one of those uncomfortable airport chairs, a coffee growing cold in her hands, her auburn hair catching the terminal's fluorescent lights. When their eyes met, her smile was genuine but tight around the edges. She knew him well enough to read the tension in his shoulders. "Welcome home, Bruce," she said, rising to meet him. Her hug was brief but fierce, carrying 3 years of complicated history in those few seconds. "Good to see you, Jess." His voice carried the rough edge that came from months of operational silence. "How have you been?" "Better now that you're..." She stepped back, studying his face with those journalist's eyes that had always seen too much. "You look tired." Before he could respond, the 2 men in suits approached. Wayne's peripheral vision caught movement, more uniforms closing in from multiple directions. His body shifted automatically into a defensive stance, muscle memory overriding rational thought. "Master Chief Petty Officer Bruce Wayne?" The lead agent's voice carried official authority and something that might have been satisfaction. "That's correct." Wayne's response was automatic, his mind already cataloguing exit routes and potential threats. The agent produced credentials. "Naval, Criminal Investigative Service. You're under arrest for the murder of Petty Officer Daniel Reeves." The words hit like a physical blow. Wayne felt Jessica's sharp intake of breath beside him, heard the sudden silence that fell over their section of the terminal as other passengers sensed drama unfolding. "What?" Jessica's voice cut through the sudden ringing in Wayne's ears. "That's impossible. Danny Reeves died 3 years ago in..." "Ma'am, please step back." The second agent moved to separate her from Wayne as handcuffs appeared with practiced efficiency. Wayne's mind raced backward, searching for Danny's face in the maze of memory. Young kid from Ohio, barely 22, with those earnest eyes. and the habit of asking too many questions the last time they'd talked. "Reaper, something ain't right about this program they got us in," Danny had said, glancing around the medical facility with nervous energy. "The doc keeps asking weird questions, and some of the guys who went through the advanced testing, they ain't been the same." Wayne had tried to reassure him. "You're overthinking it, Danny. Medical's just being thorough. You know how the Navy is about documentation." But Danny's eyes had held something Wayne recognized from his own combat experience, the look of someone who'd seen something they weren't supposed to see. "You have the right to remain silent," the agent continued, his voice cutting through Wayne's memories. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of military justice." "This is insane," Jessica said, her voice rising. "Bruce, don't say anything. I'm calling a lawyer." Wayne barely heard her. The terminal around him seemed to blur as more security appeared, creating a perimeter that turned his arrest into a public spectacle. Travelers pulled out phones, recording everything. He could already see the headlines. Jessica would have to face "Decorated SEAL Arrested for Murder." The processing at Naval Base San Diego happened with mechanical efficiency, fingerprints, photographs, the systematic removal of everything that made him human, his watch, his wedding ring that he still wore despite the divorce, the small items that connected him to the world outside these walls. The naval consolidated brig felt like stepping into a tomb. The sound of electronic locks engaging echoed in his chest as they led him to solitary confinement. The cell was exactly what he'd expected: concrete, steel, and the kind of silence that made a man too aware of his own breathing. Hours passed before anyone came. Wayne had spent the time doing what SEALs did, adapting to his environment, analyzing his situation, preparing for whatever came next. But nothing had prepared him for the moment when they brought him to the interrogation room, and he saw the case file spread across the table. Crime scene photos, witness statements, evidence logs, all bearing Danny Reeves's name and dates from 3 years ago. But some of the documentation looked newer, the paper too crisp, the digital timestamps somehow suspicious to his trained eye. "New evidence has come to light," the interrogating officer explained, with the tone of someone who'd given this speech before. Commander Sarah Pierce, according to her nameplate, sharp-eyed, probably former JAG herself, based on how she handled the legal terminology. "What kind of evidence?" Wayne asked, his voice steady despite the chaos in his head. "Physical evidence placing you at the scene, witness testimony that contradicts your original statements." Pierce's eyes never left his face. "We have reason to believe that Petty Officer Reeves discovered something he shouldn't have, and you killed him to keep him quiet." Wayne's hands remained flat on the table, but every muscle in his body coiled tight. "Danny Reeves died from medical complications. I was there when it happened. I tried to save him." "According to your new statement, you mean?" Pierce slid a document across the table. "This is quite different from what you told investigators 3 years ago." Wayne stared at the paper. His signature was there, but the words weren't his. Someone had very carefully constructed a narrative that made him look guilty, and they'd done it using his own voice. The magnitude of what was happening finally hit him. This wasn't just about Danny Reeves. This was about silencing Bruce Wayne, about making sure that whatever Danny had discovered died with him. And if that meant destroying Wayne's life, his reputation, everything he'd built in 20 years of service, apparently that was acceptable collateral damage. "I want a lawyer," he said quietly. Pierce nodded as if she'd expected this. "Of course. Someone will be assigned to your case tomorrow." As they led him back to his cell, Wayne's mind was already working. Someone had spent considerable time and resources setting this up. The question was who, and more importantly, why now? What had changed in the 6 months he'd been deployed that made silencing him urgent enough to risk this kind of exposure? The cell door closed with finality. leaving him alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that he was fighting more than a murder charge. He was fighting for the truth about Danny Reeves, about whatever program had killed him, and about the institution Wayne had served his entire adult life. Outside his small window, the Pacific Ocean stretched toward the horizon, indifferent to his troubles. Somewhere out there, Jessica was probably working her contacts, trying to understand what had happened to the man she'd loved and lost, and somehow never stopped caring about. The system that had shaped him, molded him, given his life meaning. That same system had just declared war on him, and Bruce Wayne, despite everything, found himself looking forward to the fight. The fluorescent lights in the Naval Consolidated Briggs visitor room buzzed with the persistence of trapped insects. Bruce Wayne sat across from the man who would either save his career or watch it burn. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus "Tank" Williams. Jaguar, his prosthetic leg barely visible beneath pressed dress blues that spoke of military precision, despite the weariness in his eyes. Williams had arrived with the methodical efficiency Wayne recognized in combat veterans. No wasted motion, no unnecessary pleasantries. Just a worn leather briefcase, a yellow legal pad, and the kind of focused intensity that came from years of fighting battles where lives hung in the balance. "Master Chief Wayne," Williams began, his voice carrying the gravelly undertone of someone who'd screamed orders over IED explosions. "I've been assigned as your defense counsel. Before we begin, I need you to understand something. I don't take cases I can't win, and I don't represent clients who lie to me." Wayne studied the man across from him. Williams's service record was impressive: Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and a reputation for taking impossible cases and somehow finding ways to win them. But there was something else, a haunted quality around his eyes that Wayne recognized from his own mirror. "Iraq?" Wayne asked quietly. Williams nodded once. "Fallujah, 2006. Roadside bomb took my leg and 3 good Marines." His hand, unconsciously, moved toward his left thigh. "Turned me into a lawyer, which my CO said was punishment enough for any man." The dark humor broke some of the tension. Wayne found himself almost smiling. "What do you need to know?" "Everything, starting with why you think someone wants you buried badly enough to resurrect a 3-year-old case." Williams opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. "I've reviewed the preliminary files. The evidence against you is compelling, but it's also convenient. Too convenient." Over the next hour, Wayne laid out everything he could remember about Danny Reeves, the mysterious medical program, and the growing sense that his arrest was orchestrated. Williams listened without interruption, occasionally making notes, his expression growing darker with each detail. "The witness statements bother me," Williams said finally. "According to the file, 3 people saw you arguing with Reeves the night he died. But when I cross-referenced the original investigation reports," he pulled out a thick folder, "2 of those witnesses weren't even on base that night. They were on leave." Wayne leaned forward. "Someone's rewriting history. More than that, someone's betting that a 3-year gap will make people forget the details that don't fit their narrative." Williams's pen tapped against his legal pad, a nervous habit that spoke of caffeine and sleepless nights. "Tell me about this medical program Reeves mentioned." The question hit Wayne like cold water. In his cell, alone with his thoughts, he'd tried to remember everything Danny had said about the program. But memory was a tricky thing, especially when trauma was involved. Psychological resilience testing, according to the official briefings, supposed to help SEALs handle extended deployments, high-stress situations. Wayne's voice carried doubt he hadn't acknowledged 3 years ago. "But Danny said some of the guys who went through advanced testing weren't the same afterward. Changes in behavior, personality shifts." "Human experimentation," Williams said flatly. "Christ." His hand moved unconsciously to his prosthetic again. You know what this means, don't you? If Reeves stumbled onto something illegal, they'd need to silence anyone who might corroborate his story. Wayne finished the thought they were both avoiding, which explains why I'm sitting here instead of debriefing from Syria. Williams was quiet for a long moment, the weight of conspiracy settling between them. When he spoke again, his voice carried the iron determination Wayne had heard in the best combat leaders. Master Chief, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. This case isn't about evidence or witnesses or legal procedure. This is about power, and the lengths powerful people will go to protect themselves. Williams leaned across the table. That means everyone involved in your defense is now a target. Your ex-wife, anyone who speaks up for you, anyone who asks the wrong questions. The implication hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Wayne thought of Jessica, probably sitting in some newsroom right now, using her investigative skills to dig into his case. The idea of her becoming collateral damage in someone else's war made his jaw clench. What do we do? Wayne asked. We be very careful, and we be very smart. Williams closed the file folder. I'm going to visit the original crime scene tomorrow. Someone sanitized it beyond normal protocol, which suggests they're still worried about what might be found there. And in the meantime, you sit tight and you trust no one except me and your ex-wife. Not the guards, not the chaplain, not anyone who tries to be your friend. Williams's eyes held the kind of paranoia that kept soldiers alive in hostile territory. Someone went to a lot of trouble to put you here. They're not going to stop now. After Williams left, Wayne was escorted back to his cell through corridors that seemed longer than before. The other prisoners watched him pass with the calculating stares of men who understood predator-prey dynamics. Word had already spread. He was the SEAL who killed his own teammate. In the rigid hierarchy of military detention, that made him something less than human. That evening, as Wayne lay on his narrow bunk staring at the ceiling, a guard brought him a message. Not official correspondence, just a scrap of paper that had somehow made its way through the system. Thinking of you. Don't give up, Jay. Jessica's handwriting, as familiar as his own heartbeat. She was out there fighting for him, using tools he didn't understand. Press contacts, civilian lawyers, the kind of network that existed outside military channels. The thought gave him something he'd been missing since the handcuffs clicked. Shut at the airport. Hope. But hope was dangerous in a place like this. Hope made you careless, made you trust the wrong people, made you believe that justice was more than just a word painted on courtroom walls. Somewhere in the distance, a phone rang in the guard station. Wayne found himself listening to the muffled conversation, wondering if it was news about his case, about Williams' investigation, about Jessica's inquiries. Or maybe it was something more sinister. Instructions from whoever had orchestrated his arrest. New moves in a game he was only beginning to understand. The lights went out at 2200 hours, leaving him alone with the darkness and the growing certainty that Lieutenant Colonel Williams was right. This wasn't about justice. This was about power, and the people who wielded it had just declared war on anyone foolish enough to threaten their secrets. But Bruce Wayne had spent his entire adult life at war, and for the first time since those handcuffs clicked shut, he found himself looking forward to the fight. Admiral Patricia Hawthorne's morning briefing at Pacific Fleet Headquarters was interrupted by a priority message that made her coffee taste like ash. The words on her secure terminal seemed to blur as she read them twice, then a third time, hoping her eyes were deceiving her. Master Chief Bruce Wayne, arrested on charges of murder in the first degree. The young aide who delivered the message shifted uncomfortably as Hawthorne's silence stretched on. She dismissed him with a gesture, then locked her office door, something she rarely did unless dealing with the most sensitive intelligence. Bruce Wayne. Her protégé, the young SEAL she'd mentored through his early years, watched grow from a talented but reckless operator into one of the Navy's most decorated warriors. The man who'd saved her carrier strike group from a terrorist attack in the Persian Gulf, who'd pulled 3 wounded Marines from a burning building in Fallujah, who'd never, not once in 15 years of service, shown anything but absolute integrity. The charges made no sense. Danny Reeves... Hawthorne pulled up the original incident report on her classified system. A young petty officer died from medical complications during routine testing. Wayne had been there, had tried to save him, had given statements that were models of clarity and honesty. Case closed, no questions asked. So why was it being reopened now, 3 years later, with Wayne as the prime suspect? Hawthorne's fingers moved across her keyboard with practiced efficiency, accessing files that required her Admiral's clearance. Wayne's service record appeared on screen, mission reports, commendations, fitness evaluations. But as she scrolled through the entries from 3 years ago, something made her pause. A mission report from Syria, dated 2 weeks after Reeves's death, had been classified at a level higher than her clearance. Strange, considering she'd been Wayne's commanding officer at the time. She made a note of the classification code, then moved on to budget files, a tedious but often revealing aspect of military administration. The numbers told a story that made her stomach tighten. Buried in the Psychological Research Division's budget were expenditures that didn't match any programs she knew about. Millions of dollars allocated for enhanced cognitive performance, studies, and stress inoculation protocols, all authorized by someone with sufficient clearance to keep the details hidden even from fleet commanders. Her secure phone rang. General Harrison Blackwood's name appeared on the caller ID. Patricia, Blackwood's voice carried its usual political charm, but there was something underneath, satisfaction, perhaps. I trust you've seen the news about one of your former SEALs. I have. Hawthorne kept her voice neutral. It's surprising. Disappointing is more like it. Wayne was one of your success stories, wasn't he? Just goes to show you never really know someone. Blackwood paused. I wanted to give you a heads up that the case is being fast-tracked. We want to minimize the damage to the team's reputation. Fast-tracked? Hawthorne felt the first stirrings of real alarm. Harrison, this is a murder charge. Due process will be followed to the letter naturally. But new evidence has surfaced that makes the case fairly straightforward. Better to resolve it quickly than let it drag through the media cycle. After Blackwood hung up, Hawthorne sat in her office staring at the Pacific through her windows. Something was wrong, deeply, systematically wrong. Wayne's arrest, the fast-track court-martial, Blackwood's involvement in what should have been a routine JAG matter. It felt orchestrated. Her thoughts were interrupted by her aide announcing, another visitor, Dr. Elena Vasquez from the Naval Research Psychology Division. Hawthorne didn't recognize the name, but something about the woman who entered her office suggested desperation barely held in check. Admiral, Dr. Vasquez said, her voice shaking slightly. I need to speak with you about Bruce Wayne, about what really happened to Danny Reeves. Hawthorne gestured to a chair, studying the younger woman's face. Dr. Vasquez was clearly terrified, glancing at the door as if expecting it to burst open. Her hands trembled as she spoke. I was part of the psychological research program that Danny Reeves was involved in. What we were doing, it wasn't just psychological testing. She pulled a flash drive from her purse. This contains documentation of medical experiments, drug trials, surgical implants, genetic therapy, all unauthorized, all illegal. Dr. Vasquez, Hawthorne said carefully, these are serious allegations. Why haven't you taken this to the proper authorities? Because the proper authorities authorized it. Dr. Vasquez's voice cracked. General, Blackwood signed off on everything. When Danny started asking questions, when he figured out what was happening to him and the other test subjects, they had to silence him. Hawthorne felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. And Wayne? Wayne found Danny in the medical facility the night he died. Danny was having seizures from the experimental drugs, bleeding from surgical sites that weren't supposed to exist. Wayne tried to save him, but it was too late. Dr. Vasquez wiped tears from her eyes. Danny's last words were about the program, about what they'd done to him. Wayne heard everything. So they waited 3 years to arrest him. They needed Wayne deployed out of the way while they cleaned up the evidence and prepared their case. The medical facility was completely renovated 6 months ago. All the original staff have been transferred or discharged. They've been planning this for years. Hawthorne accepted the flash drive, her mind already working through the implications. If Dr. Vasquez was telling the truth, then Wayne's arrest was just the tip of an iceberg that reached into the highest levels of military command. Dr. Vasquez, you realize what you're telling me could end careers, trigger congressional investigations, possibly criminal charges? Yes, ma'am. The younger woman's voice was barely a whisper. That's why I'm terrified. But I can't let an innocent man take the fall for something I helped create. After Dr. Vasquez left, Hawthorne sat alone with the flash drive and the weight of terrible knowledge. She thought about Wayne in his cell, probably wondering why his world had suddenly collapsed. She thought about her own son, lost in Afghanistan, and how she'd want someone to fight for him if roles were reversed. But she also thought about her career, her position, the decades of work that had brought her to this admiral's chair. Going against someone like Blackwood wouldn't just end her career. It would destroy her completely, discredit everything she'd fought to achieve as the first woman to command a carrier strike group. Her secure terminal chimed with an incoming message. Another budget anomaly, this one showing payments to civilian contractors with names she didn't recognize. When she tried to access their files, she found them classified above her clearance level. The conspiracy was broader than she'd imagined, involving people and organizations beyond the military. And at the center of it was Bruce Wayne, sitting in a cell, probably still believing that the system he'd served faithfully would somehow protect him. Hawthorne made her decision. She picked up her secure phone and dialed Lieutenant Colonel Williams's number, hoping Wayne's defense attorney was smart enough to recognize an ally when one appeared. Colonel Williams, this is Admiral Hawthorne. I believe we need to talk about your client. The conversation that followed would either save Wayne's life or destroy them all. But as Hawthorne spoke, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years of careful political maneuvering, the fierce satisfaction of finally choosing the right side of a fight. Outside her window, the Pacific Fleet rode at anchor, ships and sailors ready to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Time to find out if that oath still meant something when the enemy wore the same uniform. The call came to Gunnery Sergeant Mike Bulldog Torres at 03:47 hours, pulling him from the kind of sleep that never quite erased the sounds of distant gunfire. His phone showed an unknown number, but the voice on the other end made him sit up straight in his San Diego apartment. Bulldog, it's Ghost. Sarah Martinez. Torres hadn't heard from her in 18 months, not since she'd disappeared after Wayne's deployment to Syria. In the teams, when someone vanished like that, you didn't ask questions. You just hoped they were smart enough to stay gone. Jesus, Ghost, where the hell are you? Safe house in Oceanside. I need to see you. It's about Wayne. Her voice carried the tight control Torres remembered from combat situations. They arrested him, didn't they? For Danny. Torres was already reaching for his clothes. How did you... Because I've been waiting for it to happen. Meet me at the pier, South End, 1 hour, and Bulldog, make sure you're not followed. The pre-dawn air carried the salt smell of the Pacific as Torres walked the length of Oceanside Pier. Martinez materialized from the shadows like her call sign suggested, a slight figure in civilian clothes who moved with the deadly grace of someone perpetually ready for violence. "You look like hell," Torres said by way of greeting. 18 months of looking over my shoulder will do that." Martinez's eyes never stopped moving, scanning the empty pier for threats. "Tell me about Wayne's arrest." Torres filled her in. On what he knew, the airport scene, the murder charges, the fast-track court-martial. Martinez listened without interruption, but he could see her jaw tightening with each detail. "They're using the same playbook," she said finally. "Discredit the witness, control the narrative, make it look like justice when it's really just. Covering their asses. What witness? Ghost? What the hell happened 3 years ago?" Martinez was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dark water. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of secrets that had been eating at her soul. "I was there the night Danny died. Wayne and I both were." 3 years earlier. The medical facility at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado hummed with after-hours activity that felt wrong to Petty Officer Sarah Martinez. She'd come looking for Danny Reeves, who'd missed evening muster, something the young SEAL never did. The corridors were too bright, too clean, smelling of antiseptic and something else she couldn't identify. Through reinforced windows, she could see examination rooms that looked more like operating theaters than standard medical facilities. "Danny?" she called softly, her voice echoing off tile walls. A scream answered her, raw, desperate, barely human. Martinez moved toward the sound, her training taking over despite the civilian setting. Through a partially open door, she saw Danny Reeves strapped to a medical table, his body convulsing as unknown fluids dripped into his veins. "Stop!" Danny's voice was barely recognizable. "Please, stop. Something's wrong." Medical personnel in surgical masks worked around him with clinical detachment, checking monitors and adjusting IV drips while he begged them to listen. One of them, a woman Martinez didn't recognize, seemed to be arguing with the others, her voice rising in protest. "The neural activity is spiking beyond safe parameters," the woman was saying. "We need to stop the infusion." "Negative," came the cold response from someone Martinez couldn't see. "Subject tolerance levels were established during preliminary testing. Continue the protocol." Martinez backed away from the door, her mind struggling to process what she was witnessing. This wasn't medical care. This was experimentation. On one of their own. She was reaching for her phone when a hand fell on her shoulder. Bruce Wayne appeared beside her like a ghost, his face grim with understanding. "How long have you been here?" he whispered. "Just arrived." "Bruce, what the hell is this?" Before Wayne could answer, Danny's screaming stopped. The sudden silence was worse than the sounds of agony. Through the door, they could see medical personnel working frantically, injecting medications, checking vitals. "He's going into cardiac arrest," the woman doctor said, her voice cracking. "I told you the dosage was too high." Wayne moved through the door like a force of nature, Martinez close behind. The medical staff tried to stop them, but both SEALs had seen enough combat to recognize when someone was dying. Danny's eyes found Wayne's as they reached the table. His lips moved, forming words that came out as barely a whisper. "The program. They're killing us. The others." Danny's body convulsed one final time. "Stop them." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Get a crash cart," the woman doctor was shouting, but Wayne could see it was too late. Danny Reeves was gone. Another casualty of something far worse than enemy action. Security appeared within minutes, too quickly, as if they'd been waiting. Wayne and Martinez were separated, questioned individually, their statements taken and filed away. The official cause of death: acute allergic reaction to routine medication. Case closed. Back on the pier, Martinez finished her account while Torres processed the implications. The official story had never made sense. Danny Reeves didn't have any known allergies, and his medical records had been oddly incomplete. "So, why didn't you come forward 3 years ago?" Torres asked. "Because within a week of Danny's death, 3 other SEALs who'd been in the program died in training accidents. Because the doctor who tried to stop Danny's treatment, Dr. Elena Vasquez, disappeared for 2 weeks and came back scared out of her mind." Martinez's voice carried the bitterness of someone who'd learned to trust no one. "Because I realized that speaking up would just get me killed. But you're speaking up now. Because they're going to destroy Wayne for something he tried to prevent. Because I can't live with that on my conscience." Martinez pulled a waterproof bag from her jacket. "I've been documenting everything for 18 months. Names, dates, financial records. The program didn't end with Danny's death. It just got better at covering its tracks." Torres examined the documents by the piers. Dim lighting, bank records showing payments to private military contractors, medical supply invoices for experimental drugs, personnel files for SEALs who died in suspicious circumstances. "How many?" he asked. 12 confirmed deaths, maybe more." Martinez's voice was steady, but Torres could see the pain in her eyes. "All of them from Wayne's unit or related. Teams, all of them participants in what they called Enhanced Warrior Protocol." The scope of it hit Torres like a physical blow. Not just Danny Reeves, a systematic program of human experimentation that had been killing American servicemen for years, and now Wayne was being framed to prevent the truth from coming out. "We need to get this to Wayne's lawyer," Torres said. "Already thought of that. But approaching Williams directly puts him at risk. They're watching everyone connected to Wayne's case." Martinez stood, preparing to disappear back into whatever shadows had hidden her for 18 months. "That's where you come in, Bulldog. You've got contacts in the contractor community, people who operate outside military channels. What do you need? Find out who's financing this program. Follow the money trail, and watch your back. These people have already proven they'll kill to protect their secrets." As Martinez melted back into the darkness, Torres stood alone on the pier, with evidence of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military command. Somewhere in a cell at the Naval Consolidated Brig, Wayne was probably wondering why his brothers in arms weren't fighting for him. Time to show him he was wrong about that. The parking garage beneath the San Diego Federal Building carried the perpetual chill of concrete and exhaust fumes. Lieutenant Colonel Williams checked his watch. It showed 200 hours, late enough that only security guards and insomniacs would be awake. Dr. Elena Vasquez had insisted on the cloak and dagger meeting, and after 3 days of investigation into Wayne's case, Williams understood why. She emerged from behind a concrete pillar like a frightened animal, her eyes darting constantly toward the garage entrances. The woman who approached him bore little resemblance to the confident Navy researcher in her official photographs. This, Dr. Vasquez, was hollow-eyed, thin, carrying herself like someone who'd forgotten what safety felt like. "Colonel Williams?" Her voice barely carried across the empty space. "Dr. Vasquez, thank you for coming." Williams kept his own voice low, the habit of operational security ingrained from years in combat zones. "Admiral Hawthorne said you had information about Wayne's case." "Information?" She laughed bitterly. "I have enough to bring down half the Joint Chiefs if anyone would listen." From her purse, she produced a thick envelope. "Everything's in here. Test protocols, subject files, financial records. 3 years of documentation that proves Wayne is innocent." Williams accepted the envelope, feeling its weight, both physical and metaphorical. "Dr. Vasquez, why didn't you come forward when Reeves died?" Because I was a coward, her voice cracked, because I thought I could stop it. From the inside, work within the system to protect the other test subjects. Because I believed that people in positions of authority would do the right thing if they just understood what was happening. She moved to the concrete barrier overlooking the city, her silhouette fragile against the urban sprawl beyond. Williams joined her, maintaining the careful distance of two people who understood they were being hunted. The Enhanced Warrior Protocol started 5 years ago, Dr. Vasquez continued. The premise was sound: use advanced neurochemistry and genetic therapy to help special operations personnel handle extreme stress, recover faster from injuries, maintain peak performance under conditions that would break normal soldiers. Sounds reasonable in theory. It was. The early research was promising, all voluntary, all properly documented. Her hands gripped the concrete barrier. But then General Blackwood took direct oversight of the program. Suddenly, we weren't just enhancing performance. We were trying to create something fundamentally different. Super soldiers who wouldn't question orders, wouldn't suffer from PTSD, wouldn't hesitate to kill on command. Williams felt a chill that had nothing to do with the garage's temperature. Human engineering. Worse, we were stripping away the very qualities that make soldiers human: empathy, moral reasoning, the capacity for doubt. Blackwood wanted perfect killing machines wrapped in American uniforms. Dr. Vasquez turned to face him. Danny Reeves started asking questions because he was smart enough to realize what was happening to him and the other test subjects. The personality changes, the memory gaps, the way they stopped caring about civilian casualties during training, exercises. The implications hit Williams like an artillery shell. How many subjects? 47 SEALs and Rangers over 3 years. 12 confirmed deaths from complications, another 8 dead in what were classified as training accidents, or operational casualties. Dr. Vasquez's voice carried the weight of professional guilt. Wayne wasn't part of the program. He was just unlucky enough to find Danny dying and hear his final words. Williams opened the envelope, scanning documents that would have seemed like science fiction if not for their clinical precision. Medical charts showing unauthorized surgeries, pharmaceutical invoices for drugs that didn't exist in any approved formulary, psychiatric evaluations that tracked the systematic destruction of human consciousness. This is enough to trigger a congressional investigation, Williams said, only if we live long enough to present it. Dr. Vasquez checked her watch nervously. Colonel, I need you to understand something. The people behind this program have unlimited resources and no moral constraints. They've already killed to protect their secrets, and they won't hesitate to kill again. As if summoned by her words, the sound of vehicle engines echoed through the garage, multiple engines moving with tactical precision. Williams grabbed Dr. Vasquez's arm, pulling her behind a concrete support column as headlights swept the area. "Shit," he whispered. "They found us." 3 black SUVs moved through the garage with the coordination of a military operation. No flashing lights, no sirens, just the quiet efficiency of professionals who specialized in making problems disappear. "Is there another way out?" Williams asked. Dr. Vasquez nodded toward an emergency stairwell. "Service elevator to the street level. But Colonel..." She pressed something into his hand, a small digital device. "Everything's on here too. Encrypted, password protected. If something happens to me, make sure it gets to someone who can use it." They moved through the shadows like ghosts, Williams' combat experience guiding them around the search pattern of their hunters. But as they reached the stairwell, Dr. Vasquez stumbled, her ankle turning on debris. The sound echoed through the garage like a gunshot. Flashlight beams converged on their position. Voices called out with professional calm, "Dr. Vasquez, this is military security. We need you to come with us for debriefing." "Go!" Dr. Vasquez whispered, pushing Williams toward the stairwell. "Get that information to Wayne's defense team. Make sure the truth comes out. I'm not leaving you. You have to." Her voice carried the desperate authority of someone making a final stand. "This is bigger than one person, bigger than one case. If Wayne goes down for this, they'll have perfect cover to continue the program." Williams hesitated for a crucial second, torn between soldiers' training and lawyers' pragmatism. The decision was made for him when Dr. Vasquez stepped into the open, hands raised, drawing the attention of their pursuers. "I'm here," she called out. "Let's get this over with." Williams used her sacrifice to reach the stairwell, taking the steps 3 at a time, while behind him he heard the sounds of Dr. Vasquez being taken into custody. By the time he reached street level, the garage had fallen silent. 3 hours later, Williams sat in his office staring at the evidence that could free Wayne and expose a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of military command. But Dr. Vasquez's digital device remained encrypted, and without her password, the most damaging evidence was inaccessible. His secure phone rang, Wayne's voice calling from the detention facility. "Colonel, I just heard something on the news. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Navy researcher, found dead in her apartment. Apparent suicide." Williams closed his eyes, feeling the weight of failure and rage in equal measure. "Wayne, I'm sorry. She was trying to help us." "They're eliminating witnesses," Wayne said quietly. "Anyone who can testify about what really happened to Danny." "Not everyone." Williams thought about the encrypted device, about Sarah Martinez hiding in the shadows, about the network of allies slowly forming around Wayne's case. "They can't kill the truth, Wayne, and they can't kill everyone who knows it." But even as he spoke the words, Williams wondered if he was lying to himself as much as to his client. The forces arrayed against them seemed limitless, willing to commit murder to protect their secrets. And somewhere in the darkness, other witnesses were making the same calculation Dr. Vasquez had made, whether speaking the truth was worth dying for. The war for Wayne's life had just claimed its first casualty. Williams could only hope it wouldn't be the last person to die for the truth. The Honor Code, Part 6, Pressure Points. Captain Robert Bobby Chen stared at the classified folder on his Pentagon desk, its contents representing the end of everything he'd built in 15 years of naval service. The ultimatum had been delivered. With bureaucratic precision, testify against Bruce Wayne at his court-martial or face charges for his own involvement in the Reeves incident. The folder contained fabricated evidence that would paint Chen as a co-conspirator in Wayne's alleged crimes. Doctored communications, falsified reports, financial records suggesting he'd been paid to cover up the murder. All of it lies. But lies constructed with such professional skill that refuting them would be nearly impossible. General Harrison Blackwood sat across from Chen's desk, his expression carrying the patient satisfaction of a predator who'd cornered his prey. Between them lay the choice that would define the rest of Chen's life. "It's really quite straightforward, Captain," Blackwood said, his voice carrying the reasonable tone of someone offering a business proposition. "You testify that Wayne had been acting erratically, that he'd made threats against Reeves, that you had concerns about his mental stability. In return, this unfortunate misunderstanding about your own conduct gets filed away and forgotten." Chen's hands remained steady on his desk, but inside he was calculating angles, options, escape routes. The habits of special operations never truly faded, even in the sterile environment of Pentagon politics. "And if I refuse, then you'll find yourself in a cell next to Wayne, facing court-martial for conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice." Blackwood's smile never wavered. "Your wife's security clearance will be revoked, ending her career at state. Your children's military academy appointments will be withdrawn. Your family's entire future will disappear. The threat was comprehensive, surgical in its precision. Chen thought of his daughter at the Naval Academy, following in his footsteps, believing in the same ideals that had shaped his own life. His son, 17, and dreaming of becoming a Marine. His wife, Sarah, whose diplomatic career had taken her from refugee camps to embassy corridors, fighting for American interests around the world. How long do I have to decide? Wayne's court-martial begins tomorrow. You'll be called as a prosecution witness on day 2. Blackwood stood, straightening his uniform with practiced precision. Captain, I want you to understand something. This isn't personal, it's simply necessary. The Enhanced Warrior Protocol represents the future of American military superiority. We can't allow one man's misguided sense of honor to compromise national security. After Blackwood left, Chen sat alone with the weight of impossible choices. Through his office window, he could see the Potomac River flowing toward the Chesapeake, carrying the runoff of a city built on compromise and calculation. Somewhere downstream, at Naval Base San Diego, Wayne was probably preparing for a trial that would determine not just his fate, but the fate of everyone who'd tried to tell the truth. 300 miles south, Admiral Patricia Hawthorne stood, in her office at Pacific Fleet Headquarters, facing her own moment of decision. The phone call from the Secretary of the Navy had been brief and to the point. Distance yourself from the Wayne case or face retirement. Patricia, Secretary Morrison had said, his voice carrying decades of political experience, I understand your concern for a former subordinate. But this case is bigger than one SEAL's career, the Navy's reputation, our funding for critical programs, our relationship with Congress, all of it's at stake. Sir, with respect, if Wayne is innocent, if he's innocent, the court-martial will determine that. But your public support for him, your inquiries into classified programs, your communications with his defense team, it's creating the impression that the Navy is trying to influence the proceedings. Hawthorne had recognized the subtext immediately. Her support for Wayne was being characterized as inappropriate command influence, a charge that could end her career even if Wayne were ultimately exonerated. Now she stood at her office windows, watching the Pacific Fleet ride at anchor in San Diego Bay. Destroyers, cruisers, the massive bulk of an aircraft carrier, billions of dollars worth of American naval power, all of it under her command. One word from her could deploy this force anywhere in the world, could project American strength across 2/3 of the globe. But she couldn't protect one innocent SEAL from a conspiracy that reached into the Pentagon itself. Her aide knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a breach of protocol that spoke to the urgency of his message. Admiral, there's been an incident. Lieutenant Colonel Williams, Wayne's defense attorney, was involved in a car accident an hour ago. Hawthorne felt ice form in her stomach. How bad? Serious but not fatal. He's at Balboa Naval Medical Center with a concussion and broken ribs. Says his brakes failed on the descent from the Coronado Bridge. Brake failure. Hawthorne's voice carried no inflection, but her aide caught the implication. Ma'am, should we? We should pray that Colonel Williams recovers quickly. Hawthorne turned from the window, her decision crystallizing. And we should make sure he has all the support he needs to continue representing his client. At Balboa Naval Medical Center, Williams lay in a hospital bed that felt like a cage. The doctors said he was lucky. The crash could have killed him if his military-trained reflexes hadn't kicked in at the crucial moment. But luck had nothing to do with it. The brake lines on his car had been cut with surgical precision. Time to fail at the most dangerous point of his daily commute. The message was clear. Drop Wayne's case, or the next accident would be more thorough. Jessica Wayne sat beside his bed, her journalist's notebook filled with details that painted a picture of systematic intimidation. She'd been documenting similar incidents all week. Wayne's former teammates being reassigned to remote posts, witnesses receiving threatening phone calls, defense team members finding their security clearances under review. "They're isolating him," she said quietly, "making sure anyone who might speak up for Bruce is too scared or too compromised to help." Williams nodded painfully. Classic psychological warfare. Attack the support network, leave the target isolated and vulnerable. "But they made a mistake." Jessica's voice carried the steel determination that had made her a respected investigative journalist. "They're operating like this is still a military operation, where they control all the variables, but this is also a civilian legal proceeding, with civilian media coverage, civilian oversight." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to take this public, really public." Jessica closed her notebook. "The military justice system has been compromised, but the court of public opinion is still in session." Through the hospital room window they could see the lights of San Diego, sprawling toward the horizon. Somewhere in that urban maze, other pieces of the conspiracy were moving, other pressure points being applied to silence anyone who might threaten the enhanced warrior protocol. But Williams felt something he hadn't experienced since the explosion that cost him his leg, the fierce joy of engaging an enemy that had revealed itself. They'd made their move, shown their hand. Now it was time to fight back. The war for Wayne's innocence was about to go public, and Williams intended to make sure the whole world was watching. The courtroom at Naval Base San Diego hummed with tension that felt electric. Judge Advocate General Catherine Foster presided over proceedings that had already deviated far from standard military justice protocol. Media representatives crowded the gallery, an unusual presence in military courts, while security personnel lined the walls with the nervous energy of people expecting trouble. Bruce Wayne sat at the defense table, his dress blues immaculate despite 3 weeks in detention. Beside him, Lieutenant Colonel Williams bore the visible marks of his accident, a healing cut on his forehead, careful movements that spoke to recently cracked ribs, but his eyes held the focused intensity of a warrior who'd identified his target. The prosecution had spent 2 days building their case with methodical precision. Witness after witness testified to Wayne's alleged erratic behavior, his supposed threats against Danny Reeves, the physical evidence that placed him at the scene of the murder. It was a masterpiece of constructed narrative, each piece fitting together with the kind of perfection that only came from careful orchestration. But Williams had been building his own narrative, and today was the day to reveal it. The defense calls Captain Robert Chen. The courtroom stirred as Chen rose from the gallery, his dress whites crisp, but his face carrying the weight of sleepless nights. He'd made his choice. Family be damned, career be damned. He would tell the truth about Bruce Wayne and Danny Reeves. "Captain Chen," Williams began, his voice carrying across the silent courtroom, "you were Master Chief Wayne's commanding officer 3 years ago during the incident involving Petty Officer Reeves. Please tell the court about Wayne's character during that period." Chen's testimony was devastating to the prosecution's case. He spoke of Wayne's dedication, his protective instincts toward younger SEALs, his absolute integrity in all matters. He described Wayne's anguish after finding Reeves dying, his desperate attempts to save the young SEAL's life. "In your professional opinion," Williams continued, "is Bruce Wayne capable of murdering a fellow service member?" "Absolutely not." Chen's voice rang with conviction. Master Chief Wayne would die before he'd harm someone under his protection. Danny Reeves wasn't just his teammate. Wayne saw him as family. The prosecution's cross-examination was brutal, attempting to shake Chen's testimony by highlighting his friendship with Wayne, suggesting his judgment was compromised by personal loyalty. But Chen held firm, his answers carrying the ring of truth that no amount of legal maneuvering could disguise. As Chen stepped down from the witness stand, Williams felt the momentum shifting. Then his phone buzzed with a text message that made his blood freeze. Dr. Elena Vasquez found dead in apparent suicide. Body discovered 1 hour ago. Williams showed the message to Wayne, watching his client's face harden with rage and grief. Around them, the courtroom continued its formal dance of justice, unaware that another witness had been silenced forever. Judge Foster called for a brief recess, during which Williams huddled with his team. The news of Dr. Vasquez's death was already spreading through the courthouse, carried by the same media presence that had been documenting every aspect of the trial. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," Wayne said quietly. "First, the accident with your car, now this. They're sending a message to anyone who might testify for me, which means we're getting close to something they can't afford to have exposed." Williams's tactical mind was already working through the implications. The question is whether Judge Foster will allow us to present evidence about the enhanced warrior protocol. Their answer came when court reconvened. The prosecution immediately moved to classify any discussion of medical research programs, citing national security concerns. General Blackwood himself appeared in the courtroom, presenting classified authorizations that would effectively silence the defense's most crucial evidence. Judge Foster's struggle was visible to everyone in the courtroom. Her judicial oath demanded she follow the law, but her conscience rebelled against proceedings that felt more like a show trial than genuine justice. "Your Honor," Williams said, rising despite his injuries, "the defense has evidence that Petty Officer Reeves died not from murder, but from complications arising from illegal medical experimentation. This evidence directly contradicts the prosecution's theory of the case and establishes Master Chief Wayne's innocence." "Objection," the lead prosecutor interrupted. "Such evidence, if it exists, falls under national security classification and cannot be presented in open court." The trap was closing. Blackwood's classification orders would prevent the defense from presenting the truth, while the media presence ensured that any attempt to suppress evidence would be seen as a cover-up. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic manipulation, silence the defense while maintaining the appearance of due process. Judge Foster's decision came after a long moment of consideration. "The court will review the classification orders in chambers. Until that review is complete, the defense will not present evidence related to alleged medical programs." Williams felt the case slipping away, but then movement in the gallery caught his attention. Sarah "Ghost" Martinez had entered the courtroom, her presence immediately noticed by the security personnel who'd been hunting her for 18 months. Behind her came Admiral Hawthorne, her 4 stars cutting through the crowd like a blade. "Your Honor," Admiral Hawthorne said, stepping forward with the authority that came from commanding the Pacific Fleet, "I have information material to these proceedings that cannot be classified or suppressed." The courtroom erupted. Blackwood was on his feet, demanding Hawthorne be removed for improper interference. The prosecution table was in chaos, caught completely off guard by the Admiral's appearance. Media representatives were frantically taking notes, capturing every moment of what was becoming a historic confrontation. Judge Foster called for order, but the damage was done. The carefully orchestrated proceedings had devolved into open warfare between competing factions of the military hierarchy. And in that chaos, Williams saw opportunity. "Your Honor," he called out over the noise, "the defense requests an immediate recess to prepare for Admiral Hawthorne's testimony." "Granted," Judge Foster said, her voice carrying relief at having an excuse to pause proceedings that were spiraling beyond her control. As the courtroom cleared, Wayne turned to Williams with something approaching hope in his eyes. "Think this changes anything?" Williams looked at Admiral Hawthorne, who was surrounded by her security detail, but making eye. Contact with Wayne across the courtroom. In that glance was a message of support, of determination, of someone finally willing to risk everything for the truth. "Everything," William said. "This changes everything." But even as he spoke, Williams noticed the security personnel moving. With new urgency, their radios crackling with urgent communications. The conspiracy had been exposed, but cornered predators were always most dangerous. The real battle was just beginning. Admiral Patricia Hawthorne's decision had been made in the pre-dawn darkness of her quarters, watching the Pacific Fleet come alive with the morning watch. By 0600 hours, she'd drafted her resignation letter. By 0800, she'd transferred copies of classified documents to a secure location beyond military reach. By 1000, she was walking into the Naval Base San Diego courthouse with the weight of her entire career balanced against one man's innocence. The media frenzy outside the courthouse was unlike anything the base had seen since the last major terrorism trial. Jessica Wayne had done her work well. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and every major newspaper had sent correspondents to cover what was being called the SEAL murder trial. But Jessica had given them more than just a story about military justice. She'd given them hints of a conspiracy that reached into the Pentagon itself. General Blackwood intercepted Hawthorne in the courthouse corridor, his face flushed with barely controlled rage. Around them, his security detail created a bubble of privacy in the chaos of lawyers, media, and military personnel. "Patricia, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Blackwood's voice carried the dangerous quiet of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "My duty, Harrison. Something you seem to have forgotten." Hawthorne's response was measured, but her eyes held the steel that had earned her the nickname Iron Pat throughout the fleet. "Your duty is to the chain of command, to institutional loyalty, to the bigger picture." Blackwood stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. The Enhanced Warrior Protocol isn't just about creating better soldiers. It's about maintaining American military superiority in an increasingly dangerous world. By experimenting on our own people, by murdering witnesses, by framing innocent service members." Hawthorne's control slipped slightly, allowing decades of suppressed anger to show. "Harrison, you've become the very thing we swore to defend against. I've become a realist." Blackwood's mask slipped as well, revealing the calculating politician beneath the military facade. "You're about to destroy your career, your legacy, everything you've worked for. And for what? One SEAL who was unlucky enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? For the truth, for the oath we both took when we pinned on these uniforms." Hawthorne straightened her jacket, her decision crystallizing into action. "Stand aside, Harrison. I have testimony to give." Blackwood's response was swift and predictable. Within minutes, military police appeared with orders for Hawthorne's immediate detention on charges of disclosing classified information. But Hawthorne had anticipated this move, and her own security detail, loyal Pacific Fleet personnel, formed a protective barrier. The standoff in the courthouse corridor played out before rolling cameras and live television coverage. Two flag officers, each representing different visions of military honor, facing each other across an ideological divide that had been years in the making. "Admiral Hawthorne," Blackwood called out for the cameras, "you are ordered to report for immediate debriefing regarding your unauthorized disclosure of classified materials." "General Blackwood," Hawthorne replied, her voice carrying across the corridor, "I am reporting to testify in a court of military justice regarding crimes committed against American service members. If you want to stop me, you'll have to arrest me in full view of the American people." The calculation was brilliant. Arresting a fleet commander in front of national media would create exactly the kind of publicity that the conspiracy had been trying to avoid. But allowing her to testify would expose the Enhanced Warrior Protocol to public scrutiny. Blackwood chose the lesser of two evils. "Admiral, you have 5 minutes to reconsider this course of action." "I've had 3 weeks to consider it, Harrison. That's more than enough time." Inside the courtroom, Judge Foster was struggling to maintain control over proceedings that had descended into chaos. The defense table was surrounded by files and evidence that Williams had been forbidden to present. The prosecution sat in stunned silence, their carefully orchestrated case crumbling in real time. Wayne watched the drama unfold with the detached professionalism of someone who'd learned not to hope for salvation. But when Admiral Hawthorne entered the courtroom, flanked by her security detail and trailed by a phalanx of media, something in his expression shifted. "Your Honor," Hawthorne announced, her voice cutting through the courtroom noise with command authority, "I request permission to testify as a witness for the defense." The prosecution's objections were immediate and frantic. Classification orders, national security concerns, improper command influence, every legal obstacle they could construct to prevent Hawthorne from speaking. But Williams was ready with counter-arguments that had been refined through weeks of legal maneuvering. "Your Honor," Williams said, rising carefully due to his injuries, "Admiral Hawthorne's testimony goes directly to the core issue in this case, whether Master Chief Wayne committed murder or attempted to save a victim of illegal medical experimentation." Judge Foster's decision would define not just Wayne's fate, but her own legacy as a military jurist. She could bow to the pressure from above, follow the classification orders, and allow an innocent man to be convicted to protect institutional secrets. Or she could allow the truth to emerge, consequences be damned. "The witness will be sworn," Judge Foster announced, her voice carrying across a suddenly silent courtroom. Hawthorne's testimony was devastating. In clear, precise language, she detailed her investigation into the enhanced warrior protocol, the budget irregularities that had first raised her suspicions, the documents that proved Wayne's innocence. She spoke of Dr. Vasquez's evidence, of the systematic elimination of witnesses, of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of military command. "Admiral," Williams asked, "in your professional opinion, did Master Chief Wayne murder Petty Officer Reeves?" "Absolutely not. Master Chief Wayne discovered Reeves dying from complications of illegal medical experimentation. His only crime was being present when a young man died from treatments that should never have been authorized." The prosecution's cross-examination was brutal but ineffective. Hawthorne had spent 30 years in military service, 15 as a flag officer. Her credibility was unassailable, her knowledge comprehensive, her testimony unshakable. As she stepped down from the witness stand, Hawthorne caught Wayne's eye. The look that passed between them carried decades of shared service, mutual respect, and the understanding that some things were worth any sacrifice. Outside the courtroom, General Blackwood was already coordinating damage control. Congressional inquiries would be launched, investigations opened, careers destroyed. The enhanced warrior protocol was finished, but its creators would fight to minimize their exposure. The conspiracy was unraveling, but cornered predators always fought hardest when trapped. And somewhere in the machinery of government, orders were being issued that would determine whether justice or institutional preservation would ultimately prevail. Wayne's vindication was within reach, but the final battle was yet to be fought. The explosion came at 03:47 hours, shattering windows across 3 city blocks and sending a mushroom cloud of orange flame into the San Diego dawn. The target was a nondescript office building in downtown's financial district, the same building that housed the civilian contractors who'd been funding the enhanced warrior protocol through a maze of shell companies and defense contracts. Gunnery Sergeant Mike Torres had been conducting surveillance from across the street when the building erupted. His military instincts threw him behind a concrete barrier as debris rained down, but not before he'd seen the figures moving away from the building with the practiced efficiency of professionals destroying evidence. 20 minutes later, his encrypted phone buzzed with a message from Sarah Martinez. "They're burning it all down. Meet at Rally Point Charlie." Rally Point Charlie was a 24-hour diner in National City, far enough from military installations to provide operational security, but close enough for quick extraction if needed. Torres arrived to find Martinez hunched over coffee that had gone cold hours ago, her laptop displaying financial records that painted a picture of systematic corruption reaching far beyond the military. "How bad?" Torres asked, sliding into the booth across from her. "Total scorched earth. 3 buildings hit in the last 4 hours, the contractor office, a medical research facility in La Jolla, and a data storage center in Chula Vista." Martinez's fingers moved across her keyboard with desperate efficiency. "They're erasing every trace of the enhanced warrior protocol." "What about the evidence Williams presented in court?" "Physical documents can be discredited. Witnesses can be eliminated." Martinez turned her laptop screen toward him. "But they can't destroy what's already in the public domain." Torres stared at the screen, watching real-time news coverage of the building explosions. But interwoven with the breaking news were leaked documents, budget allocations, medical protocols, personnel files, flooding social media faster than any government agency could contain them. "Jessica Wayne," Torres said with grudging admiration. "She's been sitting on this story for weeks, waiting for the right moment. The moment Admiral Hawthorne testified and gave her official confirmation," Martinez agreed. "Now it's not just conspiracy theories and leaked documents. It's a fleet commander confirming that the U.S. military has been conducting illegal human experimentation. At Naval Base San Diego, the courthouse had been placed under lockdown as federal agents swept through every office, confiscating files and seizing computer equipment. But the investigation they were supposedly conducting looked more like evidence destruction than evidence gathering. Lieutenant Colonel Williams sat in his temporary office, his laptop displaying the same leaked documents that were making headlines around the world. His secure phone hadn't stopped ringing. Calls from Pentagon officials demanding he drop Wayne's case, threats disguised as legal advice, offers of promotion and prestigious assignments if he'd just walk away. But Williams had learned something, in the rubble of Fallujah, that no amount of political pressure could shake. Some fights were worth everything, including your own destruction. His office door opened without a knock, a breach of protocol that spoke to emergency circumstances. Admiral Hawthorne entered, flanked by 2 men in civilian suits whose bearing screamed federal law enforcement. "Colonel Williams," one of the suits announced. "I'm Special Agent Davidson, FBI. We need to discuss your client's case." Williams's hand moved unconsciously to his service weapon before he remembered where he was. "What about it?" "New evidence has come to light that exonerates Master Chief Wayne completely," Davidson continued. "We're prepared to drop all charges and offer him full reinstatement with back pay and a promotion." The offer was too clean, too convenient. Williams had been practicing military law long enough to recognize a deal that was designed to make problems disappear rather than solve them. "What's the catch?" Williams asked. "No catch, just a requirement that all parties sign non-disclosure agreements regarding the enhanced warrior protocol. National security, you understand." Admiral Hawthorne's expression was carefully neutral, but Williams caught the slight shake of her head. Whatever deal the FBI was offering, she didn't trust it. "I'll need to consult with my client," Williams said. "Of course. But understand, Colonel, this offer expires at midnight tonight. After that, we can't guarantee Master Chief Wayne's safety given the volatile nature of current circumstances." After the agents left, Hawthorne closed the office door and activated a signal. Jammer she produced from her briefcase. standard equipment for flag officers who needed to discuss sensitive matters. "They're offering Wayne a deal because they know they can't control the narrative anymore," she said quietly, "but accepting it means everyone stays silent while they regroup and start over somewhere else. And if he refuses, then they'll find another way to silence him, permanently." Hawthorne's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen the machinery of government operate without moral constraints. "Marcus, we've exposed the conspiracy, but we haven't destroyed it. The people behind this have too much invested to simply walk away." At the detention facility, Wayne was watching news coverage of the building explosions on a small television in the common area. The other prisoners gave him respectful distance now. Word had spread that he wasn't just some disgraced SEAL, but the center of a scandal that was reshaping American military policy. His escort arrived at 1400 hours, 2 guards who moved with unusual nervousness, their eyes constantly scanning for threats that might come from any direction. The walk to the conference room felt like a funeral march. Williams was waiting with the FBI's offer laid out in precise legal language. Wayne read through it twice, his expression growing darker with each paragraph. "They want me to disappear," Wayne said finally. "New identity, new assignment, full pension, and a lifetime gag order about everything I've seen." "It's a good deal, Bruce. Probably the best you're going to get." Wayne was quiet for a long moment, staring at the documents that represented his freedom and his silence. Through the conference room window, he could see the Pacific Fleet riding at anchor, ships and sailors ready to defend the Constitution against all enemies. "Danny Reeves doesn't get a deal," Wayne said quietly. "Dr. Vasquez doesn't get her life back. The other test subjects who died don't get justice." He looked up at Williams. "Tell them no. Bruce, they're offering you everything. They're offering me complicity." Wayne's voice carried the steel that had made him one of the Navy's most decorated warriors. "I didn't spend 20 years serving this country to become part of the cover-up when it mattered most." Williams nodded, understanding the decision, even as he feared its consequences. Outside the conference room, forces were already moving to ensure that Wayne's refusal would be his last act of defiance. The war for the truth was entering its final phase, and both sides were preparing for a battle that would determine whether justice or institutional survival would ultimately prevail. 6 months later, the morning sun painted the ceremonial courtyard at Naval Base San Diego in shades of gold and crimson, the colors of honor and sacrifice that had defined the United States Navy for over 2 centuries. Master Chief Bruce Wayne stood at attention in his dress blues, the ribbons on his chest telling the story of 20 years spent in service to something larger than himself. The charges against him had been dismissed 3 weeks after his refusal to accept the FBI's deal. The evidence Admiral Hawthorne had presented, combined with the media firestorm Jessica had orchestrated, had made continued prosecution impossible. But vindication, Wayne had learned, was a complex thing, bitter and sweet in equal measure, tainted by the knowledge of what it had cost to achieve. Secretary of the Navy, Morrison stepped to the podium, his words carrying across the assembled. A crowd of military personnel, media representatives, and family members who had gathered to witness this moment of institutional acknowledgement. Today, we gather not just to honor one man's service, but to acknowledge a failure of the institution he served so faithfully, Morrison began, his voice heavy with the weight of official responsibility. Master Chief Wayne's case has forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about accountability, transparency, and the sacred trust between our nation and those who serve in uniform. Wayne's eyes found Jessica in the crowd, her auburn hair catching the morning light as she recorded everything with the focused intensity that had made her one of the country's most respected investigative journalists. Her series on the Enhanced Warrior Protocol had won a Pulitzer Prize, But more importantly, it had sparked congressional investigations that were still ongoing. The Medal of Valor being awarded today, Morrison continued, recognizes not just Master Chief Wayne's actions in attempting to save Petty Officer Reeves, but his courage in standing against a system that had lost its way, his refusal to accept. Silence, as the price of his freedom, has led to reforms that will protect future generations of service members. The medal itself felt heavier than Wayne had expected, its weight seeming to concentrate the hopes and sacrifices of everyone who had fought for this moment. But as Morrison pinned it to his chest, Wayne found himself thinking not of personal vindication, but of the empty chairs. Danny Reeves, Dr. Elena Vasquez, and 12 other service members whose deaths had been the true cost of the enhanced warrior protocol. After the ceremony, Wayne walked the familiar paths of the base that had been his second home for so many years. The faces he passed showed a mixture of respect and curiosity. He had become something of a legend, the SEAL who had taken on the Pentagon and won. But legends, he'd discovered, were lonely things. Admiral Hawthorne found him at the memorial wall, where the names of fallen SEALs were etched in black granite. She moved carefully, her retirement ceremony scheduled for the following week, the price she'd paid for choosing conscience over career. "Any regrets?" she asked, standing beside him in the comfortable silence of shared understanding. "About the case? No." Wayne's voice carried the quiet certainty that had sustained him through the darkest moments. "About the cost? Every day." Hawthorne nodded, understanding the weight of command decisions that saved some lives while condemning others. "The congressional investigations have led to real change, Bruce. New oversight protocols, independent medical review boards, whistleblower protections that actually have teeth. And Blackwood? House arrest pending trial. Turns out once people started talking, there was a lot more than just the enhanced warrior protocol." Hawthorne's expression carried grim satisfaction. "Financial irregularities, unauthorized weapons, sales, a whole network of corruption that stretched back years." They stood in comfortable silence, two warriors contemplating the battlefield after the smoke had cleared. The victory was real, but victories in wars like this always came with the knowledge that other battles lay ahead. Lieutenant Colonel Williams approached from across the courtyard, his walk still showing the effects of his accident, but his bearing carrying the confidence of someone who had fought the right fight and won. Behind him came Sarah Martinez, no longer hiding in shadows, but wearing the dress blues of someone who had found her way back to the world. "Ghost," Wayne said, using her old call sign as she approached. "How are you adjusting to life in the light?" "Still getting used to it," Martinez replied, her smile carrying traces of the fear that would probably never completely leave her. But testifying at Blackwood's trial felt good, finally getting to tell the truth about what happened to Danny and the others. Williams carried a manila folder that he handed to Wayne with something approaching ceremony. "Thought you'd want to see this. It's the final casualty report from the Enhanced Warrior Protocol investigation." Wayne opened the folder, scanning pages that documented the full scope of the conspiracy. 47 service members had been subjected to experimental treatments without their informed consent. 19 had died from complications. Their deaths, covered up through falsified reports and administrative sleight of hand. Dozens more were dealing with lasting physical and psychological effects. "The victims' families are being notified," Williams continued. "Full disclosure, compensation, medical care for the survivors. It won't bring anyone back, but it's something." "What about the survivors who are still active duty?" "New medical protocols, psychological support, and the option to continue serving or retire with full benefits," Martinez answered. "Some of them are angry about what was done to them, but others are just grateful someone finally believed them when they said something was wrong." Wayne closed the folder, its contents adding to the weight of knowledge he would carry for the rest of his life. Somewhere in America, families were learning that their loved ones hadn't died in noble combat or training accidents, but as test subjects in an illegal experiment. The truth was brutal, but it was still truth. "Master Chief," a voice called from across the courtyard. Wayne turned to see Captain Chen approaching, his dress whites pristine, but his face showing the strain of the past months. His testimony during the trial had cost him his Pentagon assignment, but had ultimately saved his family from Blackwood's threatened retaliation. "Bobby," Wayne said, extending his hand. "Good to see you." "Wanted to thank you," Chen said quietly, "for giving me the chance to do the right thing. For showing me that honor isn't about following orders, it's about following conscience." The conversation was interrupted by Jessica's approach, her journalist's instincts drawing her to the gathering of key figures in the story that had defined the past year of her life. She'd won awards for her coverage, but Wayne could see in her eyes that the victory felt incomplete. "The Senate hearings start next week," she said without preamble. "They're calling it the most significant investigation into military misconduct since Tailhook." "Will it change anything?" Wayne asked. "Already has. New oversight committees, reform legislation, a complete restructuring of how the military handles medical research." Jessica's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had helped shine light into institutional darkness. "But the real change is cultural. Service members know now that speaking up about wrongdoing won't automatically end their careers." Wayne looked around at the group that had gathered, the Admiral who had sacrificed her career for justice, the lawyer who had risked his life for the truth, the witness who had emerged from hiding to speak for the dead, the journalist who had fought to make the story heard. Each of them had paid a price for standing against the conspiracy, but together they had achieved something larger than any individual victory. "So what's next?" Martinez asked. Wayne had been wrestling with that question for weeks. The Navy had offered him any assignment he wanted, a reward for his courage and a way of demonstrating institutional change. He could command his own team, serve in Washington shaping policy, or retire with full honors and find a second career in the civilian world. "I'm staying in," he said finally. "New assignment with the Inspector General's office, investigating complaints about medical research protocols, making sure what happened to Danny and the others never happens again." The decision surprised no one who truly knew him. Bruce Wayne had never been motivated by personal advancement or recognition. He had served because he believed in the ideals represented by the uniform, and those ideals were worth defending even when, especially when, the institution itself had lost its way. As the group began to disperse, Wayne found himself alone with Jessica for the first time since his arrest. The months of separation, the stress of the investigation, the media attention, all of it had changed them both in ways they were still discovering. "Any regrets?" she asked, echoing Admiral Hawthorne's earlier question. "About the case, about speaking out?" "No." Wayne's voice carried the same certainty it had with Hawthorne. "About us? About the choices that led to our divorce? Every day." Jessica was quiet for a moment, considering words that would define the next chapter of their relationship. "Bruce, we tried marriage once. It didn't work because you couldn't share the part of your life that mattered most. But this time you chose truth over silence, justice over security. You chose to let the world see who you really are. And maybe that's the foundation for something new. Not what we had before, but something better." The Pacific stretched beyond the base boundaries, its vast expanse reflecting the morning sky in shades of hope and possibility. Somewhere beneath, those waters, submarines, carried crews who trusted their commanders to use their deadly capabilities wisely. On the surface, ships patrolled sea lanes that connected nations and cultures across 2/3 of the globe. Wayne had spent his adult life serving that mission, believing that American military power could be a force for good in the world. The Enhanced Warrior Protocol had shaken that faith, shown him how easily noble institutions could be corrupted by ambitious individuals willing to sacrifice honor for power. But standing in the ceremonial courtyard, surrounded by people who had chosen principle over expediency, Wayne felt his faith beginning to restore itself. Not blind faith in institutions, but informed faith in the individuals who comprised them. Faith in the idea that courage was contagious, that speaking truth to power could inspire others to find their own voices. The medal on his chest caught the morning light, its surface reflecting not just his image, but the faces of everyone who had stood with him against the conspiracy. Danny Reeves's name would be added to the memorial wall, his death finally acknowledged as a line-of-duty casualty rather than a tragic accident. Dr. Vasquez would be posthumously honored for her courage in documenting the illegal experiments. Honor, Wayne had learned, wasn't something you received from others. It was something you earned through daily choices, through the decision to do what was right, even when it cost everything you valued. The Enhanced Warrior Protocol had tried to engineer that quality out of American soldiers, to create warriors who would follow orders without question or conscience. They had failed. Honor, true honor, couldn't be programmed or engineered or destroyed by institutional pressure. It lived in the space between what was legal and what was right, in the courage to speak truth, even when silence would be safer. Master Chief Bruce Wayne walked toward his new assignment, his new life, carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom and the satisfaction of battles fought for the right reasons. Behind him, the memorial wall stood silent sentinel over the names of those who had paid the ultimate price for freedom. The war for truth never truly ended, but today at least, justice had prevailed. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.